Let's read again the fourth sign. Just as we saw in the story with 12 images that it is impossible for such a sultan to have a temporary guest house-like country and not to have another permanent country that is stable, glorious, and a source of his grand sovereignty. Yes, the 12 images explain these. This also says it again. It is absolutely impossible for such a sultan to have such a temporary guest house-like country. There is a sultan. That sultan is very glorious, rich, powerful, capable. Such a compassionate sultan exists. For him to have a temporary guest house-like country. What does temporary mean by temporary? Temporary guest house, a small place where people will stay briefly for a short time, yet he makes it so perfect, so magnificent that it is said, if he has such a country, even though it is only temporary, if there is such a magnificent, perfect country, that is, if he gives so much importance to a place where one will stay temporarily for a short period, then what does it mean? He says, if there is such a place, it is impossible for him not to have a stable and glorious place, a source of his grand sovereignty, another permanent country. That is, if he gives so much importance to a temporary place, then it means he will have a permanent country, stable, constant, permanent, worthy of his glory. It will be a source of his grand sovereignty. It is impossible for him not to have another permanent country. Of course, he explains this at length, but here it is briefly summarized. Likewise, it is in no way possible that the eternal creator of this mortal realm would create this and not create an eternal realm. It is in no way possible that the eternal creator of this mortal realm, the eternal creator of this mortal realm, what was Baki eternal? That is, this realm is temporary, mortal, it will perish, it will cease to exist. But the creator who created this realm is eternal, permanent. That he creates such a temporary realm, but that he creates this, that he does not create an eternal realm. Since he himself is eternal, his realm must also be eternal. And then his servants must also be eternal, right? Because he himself is eternal. And it is impossible for the eternal artisan of this beautiful and transient universe to create this and not create another stable and permanent universe. This beautiful and transient universe. The universe is very beautiful. What does bedi, beautiful, mean? That is unique, magnificent, perfect. Such an extraordinary place in terms of art, but also transient, it will perish. For example, spring, is created with its magnificence in a wonderful state, in a beautiful way. But spring disappears with autumn and winter, doesn't it? This world is also created in such a magnificent way, but after a while, the apocalypse will happen, it will disappear. So it is impossible for the one who created such a world, the eternal artisan himself, to create this and not create another stable and permanent universe. And it is impossible for the wise, powerful, and compassionate creator of the world, which is a place of exhibition, a field of trial, and like a farm, to create it, and not to create the afterlife, which is the place where all its purposes are manifested. Yes, and it is impossible. The world which is a place of exhibition, a field of trial, and like a farm. He mentioned 3 meanings of the world. One of the meanings of the world is mesher, exhibition place. What was mesher? Mesher, a place of display. What does Allah exhibit? What does He show us? What does He display? Right? His power, His knowledge, His art, His mercy, all His names and attributes. Right? He displays them with His creatures. That is the skies, the earth. Right? God Almighty has filled everything with His most wonderful works, from particles to stars. The whole universe is a place of exhibition, a measure. For example, a person organizes a fair, right? He shows people what he has achieved there. We do these things. We can do these things. Our knowledge, our technology has reached these points, right? He shows. That is like an analogy, Allah, who has infinite knowledge, infinite power, infinite artistry, right? For example, He creates birds and shows them in the sky. That is, in a perfect way, He creates fish and shows them in the sea. He creates animals and shows them on land. Globes, stars, from a fly, a bird, a stone to everything. Aren't they all miracles? From the smallest fly, bird, stone to everything. With these. Then God Almighty shows His names and attributes. It becomes a mesher. Then a field of trial. At the same time, what is the world? A field of trial. For example, my teacher teaches the lesson, teaches. Then what does he do? He gives an exam. What comes out in the exam? How much did who study? Who made an effort? Who learned, right? Everything comes out. It's the same in the world too. Allah sends prophets, sends books, teaches, shows. He also shows the universe. Then He tests, for example, He says pray, fast. He gives commands, right? How much people adhere to those commands reveals how much they are aware of those truths, right? That is a field of trial. That is, can we say that every event we experience is a test question? Maybe we solve 50 tests from morning to evening. Maybe the test starts with the morning call to prayer. The call to prayer is recited. Will you get up or not? If you get up, you answered correctly. That's how it happens. It happens 5 times. Apart from that, we are constantly being tested with choices of yes or no. That's it. We are always being tested. Maybe until the end of my life, I will answer 100,000 questions. So these are them. Well, now after the test, doesn't the test have to have an evaluation, a result, a treatment accordingly? Does the test have any meaning otherwise? Then, if there is a test, of course, it must have a continuation. Well, now the world is only a place of testing. For example, one person says about prayer, look, I didn't pray and nothing happened, he says. I pray and nothing happens either. That is, this place is only a place of testing. Nothing happens in a place of testing. If something happens in a place of testing, then it is not called a test. That is, those things that will happen after the test is over. That is, for example, something definitely happens in a way that would disrupt the test, disrupt the secret of the test. That is, there is an immediate reward for believing and worshipping. And God Almighty puts a pain, a sorrow in sins, but it is not so obvious to people. For example, if the teacher corrects a mistake during the exam, it doesn't work. In the exam, if I say what I know, then it's not an exam. Therefore, it doesn't happen in a way that would disrupt the test. For example, there is an earthquake. Therefore, it wouldn't work if only the houses of the bad people were destroyed. They are all destroyed. That is, a field of trial, that is, diamonds and coal emerge. In the shortest term, in Ustad's words, diamonds and coal, a field of trial, and the world, which is like a farm, is also a farm. You constantly sow the field. You sow in this season. For example, you sow in March. You harvest in the summer, for example, right? A person sows. There will definitely be a time when he will get a harvest, right? It would be absurd if it didn't happen. In this world, people sow all their deeds, sow, and their results must come out in another realm. The wise, powerful, and compassionate Creator of the world, which is a place of exhibition, a field of trial, and like a farm, creates it. And He does not create the afterlife, which is the place where all its purposes are manifested. That is because all the purposes of this world will be completed in the afterlife. This truth is entered through 12 doors. Those doors are opened with 12 truths. This truth is entered through 12 doors. The doors are opened with 12 truths. What he means by this truth is the belief in the afterlife, right? That is, the truth of the existence of the afterlife is entered through 12 doors. What are those doors? Those doors are opened with 12 truths. That is, there are 12 real truths in this world, in this universe. I will explain them all. The person who comprehends those truths sees the afterlife, he says. That is, there are 12 truths, constant meaning in the world. He says that it is very easy for the person who understands and comprehends those truths to see the afterlife from there. So now we will start with the shortest and simplest